Donnie Houston.
What up?
What's going on, my man? How you doing?
Good. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, everybody can hear. I can hear you just fine.
Nice.
Nice. So what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Just quarantining, you know? Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, thanks for joining me, man. I see you in the studio right now?
Yeah, this is my home setup, you know?
Nice. So I was going through your bio. I was seeing that, like myself, man, you got the DJ and producer background, man.
Yeah, I grew up in Reno, Nevada, and started doing hip-hop out there and started touring, like, around the area and then Northern California and the Bay Area and stuff. And then moved down to LA 10 years ago, and then was doing some stuff here, like I did a lot of beat battles back in the day, and I won a good number of them, and then I won a couple here, and then I kind of got more into evolving into kind of like film music and orchestration, and then kind of now I try to like combine the two in a way, you know, find a happy medium. So.
Right. So did you going into like the more television and film side of music, did that lead you into the Guild of Music Supervisors and all that? Is that what led to that?
I mean, I can explain a little bit about like what path led me to the Guild of Music Supervisors, but it was a pretty weird kind of like trajectory. You know, when I was 20 years old, I co-produced an album with my old mentor, Idle Hands, who I still work with today. He's in Reno. But we did this album for this artist named Apprentice, and it was called The Red Balloon. And someone was like, I love this so much that I want to make it into a play. So what he did was he converted like the lyrics into play format, and then they got the Reno Philharmonic Orchestra to like take the music and then turn it into an orchestra. And so, you know, it was me. It was mostly Idle Hands, because I was kind of like working with him but studying under him, and it was kind of like we were just starting to become a partnership. And then there was another kid named Joey Gola, but they took this whole album with all these beats that we produced and a couple other people. And then so the first time I was like 20 years old and I saw the shit live, I was like, holy, there's something to like this creating music for orchestra, but with like this like hip hop edge. And I think at the time, like Kanye was working with
Late Registration.
Yeah, exactly, on the second album. So he was kind of like in that same tip. So we were like, you know, obviously inspired by that, and then, but we'd never seen it like anything like this. So I kind of hit a ceiling in Reno, like at about 22. I was just like, this is as far as I could take this. And then so I went down to LA, and then I just like had $200 in my bank account, and then fucking packed my stuff in.
What the fuck, man?
Didn't have a job, and like had my first month's rent paid, and then had to find a job quick. So I ended up working at this sneaker shop, like a streetwear shop called Hot Rod, just folding shirts and shit, and like really like easy kind of like entry level work. And then that kind of grew. It's a fairly small shop, but we got like really rare like Dunk releases and shit, and like rare bands and stuff. So I started just getting my hands into everything I could there. And so, and this will all make sense as it,
I got you. No, go ahead. Take your time.
Out. But I started getting into like sneaker photography and marketing and graphic design. So I would do all the designs, and like we would get new shit in like every week, like 2 times a week, like new Nikes, new Converse, new whatever. So it was our job to kind of like find creative ways to like take pictures and then get them onto blogs. So the blogosphere in 2009, 2012 was
that's the blog era.
Yeah, and so I was just like hunting out like Hypebeast and sneaker, high snobiety, you know, whatever. And so I became a sneaker photographer like when I first moved to LA, and I was still producing music, but no one gave a fuck. Like, so I was just kind of like, hey, I make beats, you know, and then they're like, cool, everyone else does too, so shut the fuck up, you know.
Take these pictures and get the fuck.
No, yeah, exactly. So, and then I was fairly known for that, and then I just kind of became the marketing director of that company after like 3 years or whatever. And then so I was just doing all their marketing, but we were working with like you know, like Diamond and Hundreds and Huff. We would do all these collaborations. We ended up doing this like Nike SB Entourage dunk, so you guys can look that up. Like Entourage did this like friends and family release, and it like maybe it was
the show Entourage. to
Yeah,
show
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah, okay,
So
yeah,
we were working with HBO and putting HBO and Nike together because that was like the type of clientele that would come to our store, and then we would kind of pair them up, be like, hey, you guys should do a dunk. And so we were behind that, and I think that was one of the biggest Nike hype like releases almost of all time, like especially for dunks. And so we were kind of like softly behind that, kind of like putting it all together, and then uh, long story long, this gentleman walks into my store and he's like, you know, I just got off the set of Iron Man 2 because we were just chopping it up. Like, I was like, what do you do? You know? And I was like, wait, what? You do what? And he's like, oh, I'm the music supervisor for all the Marvel movies. And I happen to be like a huge comic book nerd. Like, I know almost everything there is to know about like Marvel and DC. So, like, for instance, just like, I'm not, just kind of got random,
Oh, you got the
shit
action
on my
figures,
desk and
all that
shit.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was like, wait, what do you do? What's a music supervisor? Hello? And then he's like, oh, I put all the soundtracks together for all the Marvel movies since like the first Daredevil, which is in like 2004 or whatever. And so I was like, oh, well, I make music, and he's like, oh, cool. Take my coordinator's email. But like typically now you would kind of not want to do something like that. But I was just so green and like, like eager and gung ho. You got to shoot your shot. So
Sidebar. I don't. Not to cut you off, but to kind of sidetrack. You were saying you don't want to do that right now. Why would you want to not do that now
well,
versus then?
there's a certain stigma, and I'll get into that in a bit about like form and how to talk to people that do this for a living or people in the licensing space. And your first instinct when you meet a person like that is like, hey, like I need to make this work. I need to shoot my shot because I'll never see this person again. But I'm kind of now on a quest to educate and talk about like proper format to like getting your music to people that are like influencers or decision makers, right? So, but I did that, and he happened to have his coordinator in the room at the time. They were both like just kind of popping by, just like as it were, and I'll explain who the coordinator is in a bit. But anyway, I took the coordinator's email, which was like, probably never happens, or rarely happens now. It's like supervisors don't oftentimes give their emails out just because they get spammed, and I didn't know any of this. So and then I just sent my music, didn't hear back or whatever, but they would come in like every so often, and I would chop it up with them.
And at this point, how long are you in LA at this point when you come across them?
Probably 2 years. Yeah, I've been there 2 years, and currently I started going to school at the Los Angeles Recording School, and so I was like a student there, and I was also kind of learning more about like becoming an audio engineer and music producer, but kind of crafting it towards like what a composer would do or film music. So I kind of felt like I had raw skill, but didn't know a lot about the tech behind engineering or communication with an engineer or all that stuff. So the LA Recording School kind of provided me with like the resources to do so, and the equipment and microphone technique and all that stuff, signal flow, etc. So, I'm kind of playing I'm a student card with this guy. He'd come in, every couple months, but then he gave me his number, and I would just be texting him like new shit that came in because he loves sneakers. So I'd be like, oh, do you like these? Do you like these? And he'd be like, yeah, these are good, but no, I don't want those. And it was like every so often we would just send him a pair. He'd just buy them and send them. And so, but what I would also do is just be tracking his career. Like, what is he working on? I'm a fan of his work, essentially, because like at that time, Iron Man came out and it was this like huge hit, but it was like, and then that like Ozzy Osbourne riff, like Iron Man fucking is so iconic. And he was like kind of obviously responsible for kind of putting that together. But then like, it hit the like a little bit of rocky terrain with like Thor and Captain America. And then it started to kind of get more into like, fucking like Guardians of the Galaxy or the first Avengers. And so I was always kind of just keeping track. And then whenever he would do a movie, I would send him a print of art that I'd done. Because while I was doing all this graphic design, I was using like comic book art to get better at graphic design. So by this point, I was like actually really good at doing comic book art. So when he would do like Guardians of the Galaxy, I would send him a Guardians of the Galaxy Star-Lord print, and then I would just like send it to his office and sign it and just say congratulations on the back, and I'd just say congratulations on the Guardians or whatever. It's great. And then just to keep up with him and just congratulate and just keep up with his career, not being like, I'm going to ask you for stuff all the time or ask you to put my music in there. Because that's something that like I started to discover wasn't really like the thing, and that wasn't really working. But I was more interested in like the long game of like figuring out more about what this career path is and all that shit. So one day he came in, I just graduated school. I think I saw him on a panel at a Grammy U thing. So I was starting to get engaged with like Grammy U and some of these organizations, which I think is super important. And I'll explain a little bit more about how, like, why that's beneficial. But it was a program that the obviously LA Recording School was working with and with the Recording Academy. And him and his coordinator, JoJo, and Christopher Leonard's the composer, and his wife, Julianne Jordan, all did this panel, and they talked about all the movies they did. And JoJo, his coordinator, whom I've known now at this point, to this point, like probably 3 or 4 years, was like, you know, starting to become on his own. And now he ended up doing like the Sing movie and Straight Outta Compton, and
Nice.
started working for Universal, and then basically became, now he's the SVP of Sony Pictures Music. So like, keeping up with them, now I'm close with them, and just by being like a young person while they were younger or semi-young, you know, they just kind of like, we caught each other at a time in our careers where they were more accessible to me and more open and you know, like responsive to my emails and critiquing and all that stuff. And so they were gracious enough to like pay it forward, because I'm sure, you know, JoJo had that with Dave, and Dave Pryor had that with his mentors. And, you know, that was kind of like the nature of like their working mentality. And so I kind of asked him about opportunities and asked him about getting into the business. And he was like, well, come to my office. And so like about 2 weeks later, I found time to go with him based on his schedule. And then he pulled me in, was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, you know, all over the place, you know, like I do graphic design, I do video production for this thing, but I played piano for 20 years. You know, I've been producing music for like 6-7 years or something like that. And then he's like, well, you sound like you're like a jack of all trades, but a master of none in a sense, you know? And I was like, that kind of hit me hard. I was like, what? But he was kind of trying to hammer in on like, you got to figure out what you want.
Trying to get you to focus. Right.
Yeah. Cause he's, and you know, I'll explain why I kind of turned the tide on like why I think that maybe wasn't the right path, but like, for me personally, but he was just trying to get to know where he could put me and place me and all that jazz. And, I ended up talking about composing a lot and being a composer and working in film music. And, he was like, well, I got this composer I work with. His name's Christopher Leonard. He has a studio down in El Segundo. It's called Sonic Fuel. Do you want an internship there? And I was like, for sure. Just gonna send me fucking down there, man. And then about 3 months later, I had to go through all this stuff to try to make it happen based on the schedules and time frames. And, you know, it wasn't easy, like just based on timing. And not to say anything bad about anyone, but it's more so just like how the business works is like they might be wrapping a film and their intern slate's not opening up until January. So I was kind of waiting, but it was like kind of at the time I was young, it was disheartening and like trying to figure out like the best timing and all that stuff. But then I finally got in and it all worked out great. And I ended up doing that internship for about 3 months, and then it got extended to 6 months because I was doing a good job.
So from the time he mentioned the internship to the time he actually started, how long was that period between?
I don't know. I mean, like mentioned to start is like 3 months, but when you're in that 3 months, you're just like,
right.
When is it gonna happen? You know? And it was just being a young. And I think I'm talking about these themes about being a young person in the business because I think a lot of people feel like, oh shit, like it's not happening for me today. It's not happening for me tomorrow. Like when is this gonna pop off? And I think like a common thread that I will lace through is, no pun intended, is like patience and time and playing the long game and like being a community member, which takes like time, especially for folks that have been in the business for 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, whatever. You're kind of like, well, just watch and learn and take a seat and listen and be open and take our guidance, etc. So that was something that when I was a young person was like hard for me to grapple because I'm always like a go-getter, right? And then in hindsight, you look back and you're like, oh, it wasn't actually that long. It was just like, it seemed like it was that long. So, and then I was going through this thing, and like the first day I was on the Sony picture scoring stage, looking at a show that J.J. Abrams did that's not released yet, and listening to the music with a 100-piece orchestra, and watching this composer like communicate to his conductor, and there's like 15 people in this command center, or basically control room, that are like, I'd been going to recording school at it, so I'd known the equipment or whatever, but this is like a whole new beast. You've got like a scoring orchestration, like charting coordinator. You've got like assistants, like all like at the control room. You've got the composer talking about like themes of like being more sopant, or like, so I was just like, oh, I'm a hip hop dude. I'm kind of out of my league. I play piano a lot, but like this is like a new level. And just like these more specifically, these musicians out in the pit that are like pitch perfect, nailing something that they've probably only seen for a few hours, or even just like, not that. And they're like sight reading and just like nailing it. It's like this energy that I've never heard. And it was like similar to the theme of like what I'd seen in my orchestra back in the day, but like this is a whole new level. It's like film music people like that. No, there's like this urgency in that room where like there's a time limit, everyone's being paid. The producers are like, we have to hit lunch break, there's union rules, there's all this shit. So I was kind of like washed over with this like new realm, like holy shit. And I don't mean that to say that to discourage folks. They're like, oh, this isn't anything that I've ever done or whatever. It's just more like there's this
For you, it
world.
was just one of those things. Yeah. For you, it was just a
Yeah.
new experience to walk in there and see all of that. Right.
Yeah, and there's this world that people live in every day, and they're like, they probably get excited by it, but they also, there's this level of mundaneness to, like, they do it all the time now. But when I was there, I was just like overstimulated watching people. There's this guitarist named George Derrick who's like the guitarist in the film business. So like anytime you heard like the Dark Knight string sounds, those like grainy ass like pulse, that's him. Or like Transformers, that like iconic like through tension line that you hear on any movie. It's like that's the guy that does it, and he's so fucking good that it's like, but he's just like the nicest guy in the business. Like everyone knows him as a super nice dude, but he's like the John Williams of guitar sounds, And so I did a lot more with Christopher Lennertz, and he did movies like Ride Along while I was working there. He started on Sausage Party. He started on Think Like a Man 2, and he started to get into like a show with Alan Menken called Gallivant. Alan Menken did Little Mermaid and Pocahontas and all those Disney cartoons. So he's like the iconic like Disney cartoon music guy, and so I got to meet that dude, and he was super nice. But like you're in the room with a legend, and but I started to learn more about the surrounding community, like his agent, Richard Kraft. I got to meet him. I got to meet people that are like scoring orchestrators or music supervisors, that, because we all, like, once I knew one music supervisor, I started to know another, and then there would be like film music heads coming in to like look at the dailies of like what they're recording. So I started to like meet these people. I'm just an intern at this point, but I'm starting to like collect people. Like, oh, I know this person now.
You're getting into the
might
network.
know me, they might not, but I know them. And so now I could be like, the next time I meet them, I'm like, oh, I met you at Sonic Fuel when you were working with Chris on this movie. And I started to make runs to studios to like drop drives off, or and so in that I got to meet all the heads of the studios or like whatever that we were working on. So I'm on the lot now. I'm on Warner Brothers Pictures. I'm on Sony Pictures. And now I'm like getting familiarized. And in that time I was also doing catering, which is, it's not something that a lot of people like to admit, but I was also doing like big events. So I was doing like Directors Guild events, Grammy post party. So I'm meeting people doing that, but I'm also, more importantly, because you're kind of meeting people wearing like the catering outfit, so it doesn't matter, but you're in the places that you'll be later in the business. So I was at the Directors Guild. I go to the Directors Guild now for events. I was at the Paramount backlot, so now I know my way around. So when I'm walking around, I look like an idiot, being like, "Oh, where's this department or whatever?" So I say all that to say, like, when I was going through this process, like no big or no small, I was willing to take jobs that like I kind of felt like would help me in some process, or even just more specifically pay my rent. And so I ended up working for, I didn't get the job at the Sonic Fuel Studios as a permanent employee. I got like let go after my term was over. It was kind of sad because I wanted to work there, but I ended up working for this Japanese rock star doing marketing for him based on this company I had started for like helping people do marketing. And I'm saying all that to say too that like I'm picking up skills that help me as an artist, not only musically, but like in design, album cover design, video production, branding, social media, all those things that like all these artists need and want. Now I'm giving to people. I'm able to do that, but also get paid to do it. And so I'm affording my LA life, which is like basic expenses, but like are way more expensive out here in Los Angeles than a lot of other places like my hometown. So I need to just pay rent. So that's what I'm doing. And I bid on this gig to do this graphic design job for this Japanese rock star that I know nothing about. His name was Yoshiki. He had a band called X Japan. This is like one of the biggest rock bands in Asia and Japan. And they were like the, Motley Crue of Japan, basically in the 80s.
Did you know that? Did you know this when you linked up with them, or did you just find
No. I had no idea. I was just like, who is this? And it said like international celebrity needs graphic designer. And I was just throwing bids out, like literally on Craigslist. This is like in 2012 or something. And I got a call, and they're like, this guy has a deal with Stan Lee. We saw your comic book art, on your portfolio. He has a comic book deal with Stan Lee. And I was like, what? Huge Stan Lee fan. And then he also has a Hello Kitty license through Hello Kitty. And then we're doing Madison Square Garden in 3 months, backpack by New York Comic Con in the same weekend. I was like, wait, what? So they're like, we would want this person to get involved with all these campaigns. We want them to help with the comic book to animation. We would want them to be a part of this Madison Square Garden campaign and New York Comic Con campaign, and then like manage his social media. All of a sudden. So I was like, oh, I'm in to take a meeting. So I took a meeting. I got a job there, and then I started like hitting the ground running. I was doing like ads in Billboard, ads in Times Square, ads in the Variety magazine, all the trades. So all of a sudden my portfolio is just huge now, graphic design wise. But I also kind of had this background feeling like I'm straying away from music or whatever, but I kind of like where I'm going. I'm meeting more people. I got to meet Stan Lee and work with Stan Lee.
How was it?
It was great. He's like everything you would want him to be, as like the grandfather of modern mythology, and he was a super nice guy. I met him about 4 times. Like, I worked with a lot of his team at Power Entertainment mostly, but I became close with them. I got more into the comic book community, the Comic Con community, etc. And then most importantly, the reason I'm telling you this story is because I was in a board meeting. We would have these weekly meetings. I would report like graphics and social, like where we are at, how we're growing, what the new things are. I would show him new designs. He would like leave for 3 months and come back, or whatever, to Japan. Literally, he's like the Beatles in Japan. So when he goes there, like people are like tracking him. They like flood his, like when he lands, it's like paparazzi and it's crazy shit. And he would come here for 3 months or whatever. And then this dude slides me his card in my board meeting. He's sitting next to me. He's just like New York cat, and it says Jonathan McHugh on it. And I was like, I don't know. Nice to meet you. Cool. But I didn't know why he did that. And then a few days later, we were in one of the break rooms talking, and he's like, I kind of looked him up, like, who's this dude? And he's a music supervisor, and his name's Jonathan McHugh. And he worked on Rush Hour. He worked on Empire Records. He worked on Blade. He worked on Spawn. He worked under L.A. Reid at Drive Records.
Nice.
And then he's just a music supervisor. He worked on the Saw movies, and that's how he met Yoshiki, through Saw. And then so I was like, oh, I know a music supervisor. I know Dave Jordan and JoJo. He's like, oh, those are my people. So we kind of became close just through that. And then he was like, I told him I worked at Chris Leonard's, and they've known each other for 20 years. So that's how that works. And then just kind of, this is just me navigating through. I kind of got into the business through getting fired from that job just because like there was a really high turnover there, and I worked there for about a year, and I was kind of pissed about that or bummed about that, and then they're like, call the Jonathans, they have a gig for you. And so they called me the next day, and I took a meeting there, and they hired me literally the next day, and I worked for J2 Music, which is Jonathan McHugh's company. And now I'm doing the same thing I was doing for all these, or for this one artist. Now I'm doing it for all his slate of artists. I'm starting to direct music videos. I'm getting into like social media and branding, and like, so now I'm expanding this repertoire. But they were also like, you know, we can get you gigs here and there, but I know you need to live, you're getting married or whatever. We have this other gig with the Guild of Music Supervisors that they need a social media person, and the last person just left, and so we have a vacancy there. You know, it's kind of like, between all these gigs, it's like pretty solid pay, but it's like
not consistent.
It's like Frankenstein. It's not a lot here, not a lot there, but you know, I think overall it'll work out. So I took the gig. I took a meeting with this guy who's the president, named John Houlihan. John Houlihan is also a music supervisor. He worked on John Wick, the Looper movie at the time. He did Deadpool. He was working on Deadpool at the time. I didn't know any of this. He worked on Training Day, the movie. Nice. All the way back to Austin Powers. So he's like got this like prolific, I think he worked on 100 movies. And then I met this guy named Joel C. High, who's now the current president. He did all the Medea movies. And so now I'm just like meeting all these people that do all these like.
Wait, you said Medea. Like, do you mean Medea?
Yeah. Medea.
Okay, I got you. I'm just messing with you, man.
So, but he works with basically all of Tyler Perry's stuff. And so, yeah. Since the first movie or whatever. And then, but then he's worked with Chris Leonard, and, you know, there's just like all this like bouncing back and forth. And so my whole world is now kind of merging in a way. And I think by way of me knowing Dave and me knowing JoJo, they were like, okay, well, he kind of gets it. Right. But I just started doing social media, but I had all this background. Like if I just was like, I want to be a music supervisor or I want to be a composer, they would have been like, well, we don't need that. We need a social media guy. We need someone to help with our website. And I was like, luckily able to do that, because I'd probably built 40 websites at this point. I'd probably done all this social media, and all this stuff I've learned by myself. I didn't have some like schooling background about social media or website. I learned it all on my own. I just kind of saw the interest of either you have to pay someone like $2,000 to do a website, your own website, or you could just figure it out or ask people or like learn, you know, and watch YouTube and all that shit. So that's what I was doing. And over the course of like 5-6 years, now I'm like pretty good at it. And so at that point, I just was doing that, and I rebuilt the Guild's website. I rebuilt Sonic Fuel's website. I rebuilt all these people's stuff. And they're like, oh, this guy kind of knows what he's doing, so why don't we just expand like what he's doing day to day? He might be able to help out with our membership infrastructure. And so after about a year, I became the executive manager, and then I'm the executive director. Now I work on sponsorships, and now my job.
So you went from social media person to executive manager.
Yeah, in like a year. And you know what I'll say is I was the first ever hire at the Guild, so it's not like it was like this 40-person company. It was like 7-8 people being like, we fucking need like desperate help. We're only an organization that's been around since 2010, so it was probably 2013 at this point. So it wasn't like it was, you know, now it's a different situation. Now we have a staff of probably 6 or 7 people. We've got a whole board of people, and it's grown a lot. We were putting on events for like 300-400 people, and now we're putting on events for 1,200 to 1,500 people. So in our time, I've kind of helped build with this team of people like up to where it's going, where it's been. And then it says there's a connection issue. Are you guys good? Can you guys hear us?
Yeah, I can see you fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
Connecting. Yeah, anyway, I think we're good. We'll have to figure it out. But anyway, so I say all that to say, like, I was in the business of making music, producing, and getting into more of that stuff. But I'm also now looking in the business of how can I be of use to people that do this, but not be like a person that needs stuff from them and like, I want this from you or whatever. So I'm now just kind of taking on more and more to kind of just like expand like what they need, but also I'm now meeting more people. So I'm excited about the prospect of meeting more people and getting more in the game and meeting. So I'm getting into more events, and we did an education conference that I helped produce, and now we're doing panels for like, I think we did the first one, we did like 12 panels in a day, and it was like 3 panels happening simultaneously. And it's everything from like, Dave Jordan and JoJo did a panel about their history, their company format, but also like Mike Knobloch from Universal Pictures, the executive vice president or senior vice president, and then all these other people, like anyone you can think of, like Christoph Waltz, who did the Frozen movie at the time, all talking about what they did, the music behind Suicide Squad. That was kind of the stuff we did. And then that education conference grew into like this 700-person conference where we did 28 panels in a day. This last one we did at Los Angeles Film School. We've done it at USC. We did it at Emerson College. We did the music behind Black Panther. So we brought Ludwig Göransson and Dave talked about that movie. We brought in like, who else? I mean, just like anyone you can think of, like Harry Gregson Williams talking about the music that behind the Shrek and the Martian and all that stuff. But we also do things about talking about how music coordinators get their gigs, or metadata in licensing and all that stuff. And I guess that's where I could move into is I started working on a show with John Houlihan called Training Day. He took me on for like 2 or 3 years, and I was just working on stuff with him, and I got into like being a music coordinator. Again, it's not making music for film and TV, but it's figuring out more about how music deals are getting done, what music licensing is, how music supervisors work. I'm more interested in that to diversify my music making portfolio as like a person who knows how to do business too, because you can make great music, and in order to be in this business, you have to make great music, and that's like the number one prerequisite. But you also have to know all these other factors about music licensing. And the reason I say that is because there's so many people making great music, but also knows this music licensing space that will crush you as an independent, because they have the money, they have the resources. So you as a music maker need these edges, because you need to know and speak languages like metadata, or licensing terms like options, or clearance request forms, or music cue sheets, all those things like that I didn't know anything about, even up until I started coordinating even. Like I got thrown into this fire, and then all of a sudden now I'm like working on basically $1 million show budget for music. And so now I'm looking at how the deals get done on a show or a movie. And it's like, let's say there's a movie with a $100,000 or a show with $100,000 per episode budget, which is really high. A lot of them are like 50,000 or 80,000 or less. But let's say it's 100 just to keep the numbers even. 50,000 of that's going to major labels like immediately. Like let's say one song is like $25,000, and that's like for 10-second use, and it's like Cake by the Ocean or some song like that, like some big like cue. So now you have a $50,000 budget, and you got to fill, like, let's say you have 10 more songs to fill, right? Do you see how quickly that money goes down?
Right.
And then let's say 25 of that 50 goes to like mid to high level label, like 10,000 a song. And now you have this $25,000 of like, mid to low levels, like hits that like the supervisor knows he can work with, because they'll turn around something that he requests. Or it's like some trusted source, like maybe we need like authentic music from the 1980s that's like vintage synth sounds that are authentic. Or maybe it's like French polka from 1960, like, so that some music library licensing company has like authentic people that are from that era, that they have this catalog. So that like they're getting like those hits all the time. So now you have this, like, let's say $10,000 of like Goldilocks range is what I call it, where you're an independent artist and you are shooting for the stars for these supervisors, and maybe your song fits what they need, but you've done the research, you're in line to do it, and then you're building that established trusted relationship. Maybe there's a $2,000 spot for you, or maybe there's a $5,000 spot for you. And that's the range that I think that independent makers are striving for, because all that other stuff is going to the major labels, unfortunately to say. So unless you have some major publisher or label representation, or even just like really the core of what supervisors are doing is like feeding the needs of the director or the writer of the show or the showrunner. And the showrunner's like, I want Hannah Montana for this cue. And you're like, well, I'll be getting you Hannah Montana then, even though it's not maybe in the artistic integrity that I, as a supervisor or whatever, want. It's like that director wants it, and your job is working for that director or that producer and figuring out the dynamics of who's in charge and what music is in charge. And then you have this, like, you can kind of like make suggestions that are like in the same sphere or in the same vein, or maybe there's a couple cues that like they don't have suggestions, so your job is to feed them what fits the scene. Like maybe it's an Americana roots track, or maybe it's a hip hop track, maybe it's like you know, a scene from like, you know, I don't know, like with Training Day we license like anything from let's see, NWA to like Journey or AC/DC. So like the range is crazy. Like we license so much stuff. We license like some Russian track called Hard Bass Adidas, because there was a Russian episode where these like mafia members are in this like Russian nightclub, and so like that's what you're feeding. You're feeding like, what does the scene call for? What, you know, what's going on? It's not like I think a hip hop track should go here. It's more like
what makes sense.
Yeah, like where
Right.
are they? They might be
Right.
in France, and like for instance, Marvelous Miss Maisel's not gonna want like trap music. They're gonna want like period 1960s. Like maybe there's like a call for like Happy Feet or doo-wop music, or like some kind of like but it's period. It's like it has to be with the same instruments. It has to be like of the time and like that. So that is something that the supervisor is constantly researching. Maybe there's an episode where they shoot in Paris. They need French music now, you know, of the period. So 1960s French music. And so some company is raising their hand like, oh, we have a whole library of that, because that's what we do, that we provide period French 1960s music. And so I think it's important for artists listening or who will listen to this to be like, what do I do? What kind of music do I serve? And what kind of supervisors are working on projects that my music suits? Not like, you know, a big common thread with music is like music supervisors or people who produce music more specifically is like, I have music that sounds cinematic, or I have music that sounds like it would be good in a movie. That doesn't serve anything that a supervisor is looking for, other than like, well, maybe it's not the movie I'm working on. Maybe it's not the show I'm working on. It's just something someone told you. Maybe you look at your music more specifically, and maybe you make female-driven acoustic singer-songwriter stuff. Maybe your show is something like Nashville. Maybe your show is something like, I make you know, Baltimore area hip hop, and that's like where my shit is, you know. And so maybe like The Wire is your show or whatever, you know, something that has like of that area or period. So like for instance, like Chicago style hip hop might not work in the show Atlanta, right? So
Right.
that's kind of what I think artists, if they're wanting to get into film music space, want to start looking into. And what I always recommend is like, I like to know who the supervisors are as people. So like I'm luckily in a situation where I live in the media market that supervisors tend to live in. It's either here or New York or Nashville. Or there's some people in Canada. There's some people in, or like Toronto and Montreal, Vancouver. There's some in Atlanta where they make a lot of movies. There's some in Europe, but like you got to look at the space you're in and look like what kind of like media market is there here. If you live in the Bay Area, maybe the tech sector of ads is your space. Maybe if you work in Seattle, there's, you know, I'm sure there's supervisors that work for like Microsoft or Amazon or whatever. Like maybe they live up there, you know, and so you got to research your area and figure out who's working in what regions. If you work in Atlanta, like Adult Swim's there. Maybe if you make that kind of like, you know, boom bap hip hop that like, you know, like that Adult Swim calls for, maybe that's your market to reach. Maybe figure out who works there, who is servicing that music or that client. So that's what I would recommend doing, is just figuring, like, your best friend is research. Your best friend is like, what's up? What's going on? Everyone's in the business. I know a lot of these people that are in here. That's cool. Your best friend is like research and knowing your music. So a big thing that I always like to talk about is metadata. And a lot of people don't know what metadata is, but it's like analyzing your music and finding the keywords that would be searchable in like a library database. So let's say you make 1980s synth, like for instance, my last project was like 1980s synth, retro wave, synth wave, or like vapor wave. Like all those terms are things people would look up, or like pop, synth pop, or let's say you make like I just said, like singer songwriter, acoustic, female driven vocals. Maybe you say like Americana roots, all those things. And what I would recommend is going to like a music library and looking up, like, just researching how they quantify terminology. I think certain companies like Disco and Midio are now launching platforms within. Disco is a music library playlisting resource center. So like you can upload your stuff and manage your own libraries through Disco and send that library as streaming links to supervisors or whomever. Managers can send it. It's streamable, it's downloadable, and that's what I would recommend all you guys look into is disco.ac. There's a bunch of other ones. There's, I think, Midio and a couple others. But what they're doing is they're starting to launch AI platforms that in their programs that crawl your music and they quantify the terms for you. So that's stuff that's starting to come out. So technology is like killing it. They're ahead of that game already. And so a lot of these companies are already doing that. So you would behoove yourself as a music maker that wanting to get in the music for media space to start looking into like what that is. So I would, see trap, dubstep, electronic pop with dark synths. There's like all that stuff that you can look into and start using song by song. And another thing that is very important when you start looking at metadata for music is publishing information. So like, let's say someone gives you a call, like you've now built this relationship with the supervisor and they go, oh, I like this track. But they don't know it's you because you didn't put your information in there. It just says like hot track version 6.0, like 6/15/2020 or whatever the year is. So because a lot of people do that, they'll go like final mix down, final whatever, and then it doesn't have any information in it. So in metadata, what you could do is like you can go into the info of your track, research like how to do that, like input metadata for songs. You can put your artist name, your first and last name, your contact info, your email, your phone number. All that stuff's so important because if I'm going through stuff that I pulled off on let's say a cold email or like a track solicitation or whatever, I found it and it doesn't have that, like I don't know where to fucking contact you, so I'm moving on.
On to the next one, yeah.
But also it has like, hey, I wrote this with Steve and Johnny and Karen, and we have 33% here, 12%, 20%, whatever, that equals 100%. So that way, as a coordinator that I'm going through or a supervisor, I'm going through and being like, this is all the work's done for me. Because the way we have to find songs is, let's say you want to license like Nelly's Hot in Here, right? You go to ASCAP or BMI, hopefully they've registered that song, which with major label reps, they usually always do. But let's say as an independent, like you didn't register with a PRO. Well, I'm not finding it. So I don't have any information about who represents your song. And that's so important to get paid for music is working with CSAC or ASCAP or BMI or any of these companies that are PROs, performance royalty organizations. So they essentially, like, let's say your song gets picked up on a movie. They are the ones that find it and they are the ones that handle payouts to you. So if you don't put your PRO information in the cue sheets, when we go to ultimately license a track from you, you're not going to get paid accurately or at all. So I would say, like, all that stuff. Like I'm a writer with ASCAP and I own 33% of the song, or I own 100% of the publishing, but Cobalt, or let's say like Universal Music, owns my master. That's important to know, because now we go to our contacts at Universal and say, hey, do you guys control this song? And they'll go, yeah, but we sold it to Sony ATV. Now they own like this, you know, or whatever company owns this publishing now. And so we have to do that like private investigative research to find and track down the ownership of songs. And sometimes for songs, it's a mystery. Yeah, like even songs that you would be like, this is like a major hit, you know, like this was like charting on Billboard, and like it's now gone as a mystery. Or this song was like, this is a Johnny Cash song or whatever, and you're like, well, they changed ownership, or the previous publishing owner passed away, and so the rights went over to his wife, and then she sold the rights to his husband or her new husband, and so we always have to do that. And so if you could make your licensing or publishing or information easy, that way because we're dealing with these rabbit hole wild goose chases, like, whoa, we'll work with you again because you were forthright and honest with our, you know, with your information. Another thing is like, let's say you make hip hop, right? Because everyone wants to make hip hop. Let's say you found this sick vinyl sample and you fucking just cut it and you like started sampling off this vinyl, and you don't like clarify that you've now used like an Aretha Franklin track or some even more like deep cut song that like the Orchard owns, that like you didn't clarify, and we just go, oh, it's 100% owned by me because I made this beat. Well, now Orchard or whomever is going like, well, this is actually a sample of ours and it wasn't cleared, and we actually own fucking 33% of this because it's a sample of our original track. And it's not like, you know, like a lot of folks are kind of using spliced or pre-cleared kind of samples, which is like what I would recommend doing. But a lot of people aren't doing that, and they're like, hey, you know, and if a supervisor gets wind of an artist or a producer doing that and not clarifying, guess what? They are now never going to get licensed ever again by that supervisor, maybe everyone else, because they've now burned like potentially like their bridge in the industry, but also like they've now caused maybe a potential lawsuit with Warner Brothers or Warner Brothers Pictures or whomever is now liable for this potential $1 million lawsuit or whatever that is. It's like, what? You know what I mean? Like I'm not a millionaire, so you know, I don't have the $1
you know, they're
million
not going to come
to
for the
cover
producer
that.
for sure. Yeah. They're not coming for the producer. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that I'm involved, and so like now the studio's like, dude, what are you guys doing? You guys are supposed to be like managing this as a supervisor. We'll never hire you again. So it's on us to be like, well, fuck that. We're not. Why would we take a risk on some like up and coming producer that doesn't like we don't trust, because our jobs are on the line and our reputations are like on a tightrope essentially. So the more established trusting relationships, like long-term partnerships, like that's why supervisors work with people they trust. And what I say is like, I, over the course of this last 10 years, am developing relations with these people, all of them, in a way that is a long play. It's not about like, I need to get you my music now. It's like, well, that's good. They'll never listen to it. They'll delete your email right away. But once they start to like, you break down those walls, you break down this trusting relationship, and you have your paperwork in order, your licensing, your publishing information, you're using terms like one stop or easily cleared, which means that you control the all of the publishing of your own track, or like you're able to like get your people that you've worked with these songs on in order to say like, I agree with what you agree with it, which means like they'll go and do the work on the behalf of like the supervisor. So we're not individually reaching out to all these parties. They're clarifying who the publishing parties are and saying, we all agree on this fee, all in. All in means like, you know, everyone's all in on this amount, master and publishing. So here it is. Because the idea as a supervisor or coordinator is you have to track down 100% of the publishing of the track, meaning like you divvy that up amongst who like produces, writes, and sings on the record, or you're right, and then also who owns the recorded work, the master rights. And a lot of times that's multiple parties. On a hip hop track, that can be 10 people. And if you do the math, let's say I work on 10 tracks per episode of a show and 13 episodes, that's 130 songs, meaning that's 130 things I have to go clear with 10 parties, 5 to 10 parties per song. That's 1,000 parties I have to reach out to.
Yeah.
And they all have to add up to 100%. If I get 98% on a song, it's not going to get licensed. So I got to find a new song. And that happens a lot. And we don't have the time. A TV show typically mixes once a week. So the deadlines are like tomorrow. And so we're like, I need this shit today. If you don't get this to me today, we're not doing it. And we'll pull it out of the library. And what I want to say as a library is this is a prolific resource that major labels are using as like arms of their company. So Universal has 10 libraries. Warner Brothers has 10 libraries. Sony has 10 libraries. And they all make all this great music that's so affordable. Like, it's unbelievably affordable. And they don't play. They'll get you the song. They'll have someone write the song that day and turn it into you. And so you're like, oh, yeah, I got this, Welshly Arms track, right? And Welshly Arms actually is controlled by Position Music. So they're actually a great resource. But let's say that, like, they don't want to use the song or whatever, or whatever. Let's say that it's a Nelly track. Or let's say it's like an Eazy-E track, and the Eazy-E or the Death Row Records, all that, like, passing ownership back and forth. I think Death Row's owned by Hasbro now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But for a long time, it was like really hard to figure out, plus all the samples that were going on. So some banger, no-name producers are like making records that sound like Eazy-E tracks from the 1980s or 90s. And they're just doing it for these libraries or whomever. And so supervisors are going to these libraries and they're licensing these tracks for like so affordable, like way more affordable. And so, and the headache's not there. They're turning in all their information, all that stuff is just super quick and easy. And they're essentially like, removing and alleviating any problems, but also like allowing supervisors to like, crush deadlines faster. And then like another thing is like let's say there's a scene in a movie that's like a nightclub scene, right? And it's like, it's not, or a car is passing by and you barely hear music audibly, or it's like music that's just bass sounds. You can kind of hear that it's a song, but it's not. That's where library tracks are amazing, because the film music budgets, or like the directors are like, why would we pay $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 for a track you can't even hear? So a lot of times they'll go to library resources to find that. And sometimes they'll go to independent artists, and as an independent artist, you're like, well, this isn't like exactly creatively what I love, but like, hey man, that's money. And that's also like, you can now like build the clout saying like, I just got this major placement on a TV show for the CW or CBS Studios, because all those shows, all those procedural dramas or whatever have music like that, or a video game where, all those markets are looking for music that's like, it's not this like anthemic, like end credits scene. It's like, hey dude, I don't even know if that was music, but I got paid like $2,000 for it. So fuck it. Yeah. And also if it like goes into syndication, your writer share gets royalties for that. So maybe it goes in Germany and you don't even know the German media market, and maybe it's not a show that's successful in the United States, but it's big in the Netherlands. Guess what? Money coming in every month or every couple months, you're getting a royalty check. So those are avenues where like artists are just exploiting, like, or producers or licensors or whatever, because they know they're a volume game. And I know a lot of libraries that are getting those like every day, or every week or every month. And so as an independent artist, it's going to take you time to figure out like what that is. And maybe you shoot for like one placement a year, right? For now. And then maybe in 2 years you go like, maybe I could do like one a quarter or one every 6 months. And all of a sudden you're starting to gain the trust of these people more. You're starting to learn who the players are. the decision makers. Maybe you're looking into these libraries to be like, I make fucking a beat a day. I make 2 beats a day. I make 5 beats a day. Maybe some of my music is good for these libraries, and they upload it to their systems, and it's like APM Music or Universal Production Music or Sony. Sony has them, or Warner Brothers, Warner Chappell Production Music, or FirstCom. And what you can do is at the Guild of Music Supervisors website, we have like an award show and an education conference on our website, guildofmusicsupervisors.com or gmsawards.com. And we have a sponsor tab. And all those sponsors are like who I'm talking about, you know, like their libraries or their publishing companies, or they.
Wait, not to cut you off. I see that counting me down. We have about 1 minute and 20 seconds left before they shut us off. So,
cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where I would look.
And we can get back on, but I mean, I just know we're gonna cut off.
Yeah, I'm down to talk a little more, but
cool.
And sorry if I'm ranting. It's more.
So no. This is great. This is great. Yeah. This is perfect.
So yeah, go to the Guild website, look up the sponsors, and say, you know, look up these companies, find out some of the reps from the companies. Be nice, be cool, be kind. Like, don't be a dick, and don't burn any bridges, and like understand that like. Dude, everyone in this business is super busy and they don't have time to listen to music, quite frankly and honestly. So figure out how to make that, like, get ahead of that in a way that like makes you cool. Like, don't be uncool. That's what I would say. You know, I'm a big fan of like when I was coming up, taking the education approach. Like, I don't know what this business is. I want to learn more about what you do. I want to build a relationship with you. In these times, like,
we got about 15 more seconds. My bad. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, let's hop on and jump off or whatever. But
okay, cool.
Hold on, I'm gonna hop off. Jump back on, folks. Finish a little bit, and I want to also hear more about you too, because I know I've been talking a lot. So, so what I was saying was like I'm a big fan of like taking the educational route on. Like, I'm more about getting more involved in the business. Even though I produced an album. So when all this time and all the things I was just talking about, I produced a 21 track album. So I'm interested in that pursuit as well. And I'm transparent about my music making. You know, I try to make sure that when I'm doing guild stuff or talking with supervisors, or now I work with like senior vice presidents and label owners or label executives, I'm not pitching them my music. Like, that would be foolish, you know. I'm more so just like building a long-term, like.
I was going to ask, how do you kind of, you know, balance the two of being a creator and also dealing with creators?
Yeah, a lot of it is knowing your role in a time when you need to know your role, and knowing that it's a long game. And I'm more into like developing friendships, and those friendships turn into like, oh, dude, I didn't even know you made music, or you know, I'm not quiet about it. So I'm not like in a business email being like, oh, by the way, check out my new album. It's more like I'm on social media. I'm putting production videos out. I'm putting music videos out. I'm sending those to my friends. My friends a lot of times happen to be colleagues now, but I'm not like, I try to really weigh in on what is a conflict of interest. If I'm a guild person, my interest is the best benefit of what supervisors need. Growing the education of a music supervisor, advocating for the craft of supervision. My situation is not how do I pitch my music to supervisors, because that's on the other side. However, I do want to also advocate for the music libraries and the labels and the publishing companies, and it's in my vested interest to get to know those people, because I am one of the heads of sponsorship. So guess what? Those companies are the lifeblood of keeping the guild alive. The guild is a nonprofit, so we have a membership base, and they pay dues, and we give them resources, and we give them events and stuff. Those events all cost money. Those events cost like thousands of dollars, especially when we do our conference or our awards. Our awards is a very expensive endeavor to have a space like the Wiltern Theater in Los Angeles. It's not cheap. So we rely on sponsors to keep those events going, and we also advocate for those companies, because we have this like ecosystem of supervisors need great music, publishers and record labels need to get their music in media forms to continue their revenue streams. And so there's this ecosystem that even though we're on like two different you know, two different kind of sides of the spectrum. There's so much crossover. And so with the Guild, it's kind of like this apex position where all roads kind of lead in through the music business, the music supervision world, but also writing and producing and directors and actors. They all kind of pull into music supervisors. Because like, let's say an actor has an on-camera performance where it's like, I don't know if you saw like A Star Is Born, but like all those performances where they're singing or performing, they have like that was Julianne Jordan and Julia Michaels, who are like good friends of mine. Julianne Jordan is the wife of Dave Jordan, so that if that gives you an idea, they work on huge films as well, and they're a family of supervisors, and there's a lot of those. There's John Houlihan and his wife Julie Houlihan. There's Season Kent and Keir Lehman, and so if you just look up these names, you'll see like there's a lot of people who like are independent supervisors. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, they met doing the job, because we always do events, we always do mixers. My point is like everyone kind of knows each other. They end up meeting each other. There's a supervisor named Garrett McElver who has a significant other named Dondrea, who's also a music supervisor. So it's just one of those things that we're all so close that, you know, we all go to events and meet each other, and we see each other like at showcases and parties. And my point is like, hey, guess what? Guess how I got into the business? Guess how all these other people that I know who are working with the Guild now, or who have moved on to like working at BMI or BMG and all these other companies, they ended up volunteering as Guild volunteers and working like a mixer or an event or our award show or a conference. And then they met the head of Sony or, you know, whatever. Or they met like someone as a coordinator at ASCAP, like, and then that person moved to another company, and that person moved up to another company. And in 3-4 years, we've all collectively grown into roles of like, you know, from being like a small coordinator or a volunteer together to we're starting to become vice presidents of companies or executive directors or whatever it is that everyone's kind of growing. And then in 10 years, I don't know what that scope looks like, but you can kind of see, I know folks that have been in this business 20 years that have known each other when they were like 20 or, you know, 25 or 30. So it's really all about being in the long game, and like knowing that if you're serious about this, you're not going anywhere, and your life's not going to change tomorrow, and it's probably going to get pretty difficult trying to chase this endeavor, and you're going to have to take jobs that you don't want to do, and it's fucking hard, and you're going to be like, well, I just worked 50 hours this week, or I worked this 15-hour day, which was what I was doing when I was interning, because we were working on a movie. I don't want to go home and make a fucking album or work on music or whatever, but you have to find and dig deep and find that within you to be like, you know what, I guess I have to, I need to. Or you'll find these little creative spurts where you're like, I haven't made music in 6 months. You know, that happens. That happened to me. When I was working on shows, I was like, dude, I haven't made music. So I stopped and just made an album. I was like, I'm stopping coordinating for a while or doing whatever, because I want to focus on what's important to me. And coordinating was paying me money, and so I had to do other stuff to like make that work. But I kind of you know, think it's important as a person who wants to stay in as a music producer or composer to be putting a body of work out, and not lazy bodies of work either. Like take the time to like make your shit good. And I'm big on like self-analysis, like look in with yourself and be like, is this shit good? Because sometimes the answer is no, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, wow, let's delete this now, you know, or whatever. Or like maybe I'll go to a recording session with somebody, I'll work on a track, and I'll be like, ooh, I do not like this at all. I don't think this is worth putting out. I don't think this is worth the amount, maybe money I put into like booking the studio space. Like I've done stuff at like big studios that I don't like, and I paid like $100 an hour to do it, you know? Or I'll be in a studio environment with someone who doesn't come prepared with their lyrics, and you know, you're kind of assuming when you are investing $100 an hour, like
that people will show up ready to go. Yeah.
But they're
Right.
not. Some people
Right.
are like, you think even in a market like LA, like you'd be like, everyone's crawling with talent or whatever, but you go there and or you live here for a while and you'd be like, yeah, only like 20% of people that are doing this are actually like really good. That if you bring them in, they're prepared, they're ready, they're rehearsed. And I don't know about you, but I listen to a lot of like Sam Cooke or Ray Charles
Oh,
or
Sam Cooke
like
is my
Otis
mom's favorite
Redding.
artist, man. Otis Redding,
Yeah,
I was
but like
raised on all that, man. Yeah, yeah,
motherfucker went into the studio wearing a suit and was like, we
yeah,
rehearsed this before and we nailed this in one take. Ray
yeah.
Charles nailed shit in one take. And now it's like, well, maybe Jay-Z does it in one take, but no one else, right? But
Right.
back in the day, it was like,
It
like
was a
if
level
you
of
got,
professionalism. Yeah,
yeah, like if you got into the Motown studios and you look like a chump, everyone would be like, dude, like Holland Dozier and Holland weren't playing, dude. They were like,
yeah,
well, maybe we should try this for another 2 hours while you figure it out. It's like, yo, you'll be one less member of the Supremes in like a few minutes,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like I'm in the same boat. Like, yo, I don't know. Like I like to work with people, and I don't like I'm not mean, but I'm more like maybe I don't call you next time. Maybe I'll be like, oh, that was cool, but like maybe I don't release that track, or maybe like maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll take a second chance on you, and we'll do it again, and it better be good the second time. But like in this time in this business, like there's like especially if I'm working for someone for free or for, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, well, I'm working on this because I'm passionate about it. But I think the ultimate end goal is like, we want this to be good. And I think we both want this to be good, but we also like, is this what we do for a living or is this what we do for a hobby?
Yeah.
And I think that if I'm investing money, I want it to be like, hey, this is worthwhile for my investment, right? And I work with a lot of people who are up and coming, and I work with a lot of people who like maybe aren't given the shot because I see something in them, or maybe there's this one track they've sent me that I'm like, ooh, there's something here, and I like to like take risks like that, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but like that's where I'm at, is just like take what you do seriously, but also like look in yourself and be like, I don't know if I want to put this out. I think I want to work harder at this or learn more stuff. Or like, I'm always of like, do I know enough about Pro Tools? Do I know enough about Logic? Am I learning enough about the VSTs that are coming out? Like, I just got Arturia. Like now it's my job to unpack like those synths, or like, do you know what like a low pass filter does? Or do all those things? Like if you're producing music, or if you're like an artist, like, and you're like relying on another producer to know those things, or an engineer, it's like you're doing yourself a disservice. So as an artist, I'm like, yes, you can send me music, send it to me on Instagram. Like it's always about self-assessment and growth and learning. So yeah.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about Can One Live. A little bit about that. About the
Yeah,
Can One Live
so
thing.
I started Can One Live with a producer named Brandon Hickok in like 2010. We both happened to live in Reno and grow up in Reno, but we both met each other in LA. And a mutual friend was like, "Oh, I got this friend who produces. He's going to MI," and I was like, "Oh, cool." And he's like, "You should meet him." And he's from Reno, and so we started making music together pretty quickly. And it was called Can I Live Productions, and that's obviously from the Jay-Z lyric. And
Right.
I kind of thought it would be more impactful after a year or two to change that, because it's a little bit more like condensed Can One Live, and it's a little bit more of a derivative. So, and I liked the idea that it invokes, is like, we were not doing well, and there's a lot of communities that aren't doing well financially or oppression wise. So I thought the idea of Can I Live or Can One Live is kind of like an interesting thought evoking name. And I also think it evokes a question. So I started playing into the idea of it being a question. So the first logo was a question mark. And then so, over time I kind of evolved it, and I want it to stand alone more than just an artist name. It's more about like an idea or a company, or like a home that the ideas can live in, essentially.
Right.
And so I produced a bunch of content, video and audio under that. And I've done 2 full feature albums, 2 21-track albums or instrumentals. And that's kind of the idea of it. But, I've been kind of performing under that moniker just to kind of grow its brand sake and all that. But it all kind of started with like all that branding stuff I was talking about was like, instead of being Hunter George Beatmaker, I kind of like thought it would be better to have a brand and a brand to grow under. And so a lot of the stuff, even though I'm still Hunter George Beatmaker, producer, whatever, I thought and have been growing this thing, and over time it's grown into an interesting brand that I am going to continue to grow. You know.
Nice.
So,
Okay.
so what about yourself? I want to hear more about you and your journey in Houston and all that stuff.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, man. So I'm from Houston, man. I'm a DJ producer. Started DJing when I was 15 years old, which is probably almost 20 years now. Let's see. DJ producer. I have a broadcast journalism degree. I went to school for journalism or whatever. That kind of led into the podcasting thing, but yeah, man. I've as far as Houston's concerned, most of my work has been out in Houston. Like I've worked with probably everybody who's out here: Slim Thug, Paul Wall. I don't know, Latoya Luckett, Sauce Walker. Like, I mean, a lot of Houston-based stuff. I worked on.
Hey, is Paul Wall making jewelry full time, or is he still like making music and shit?
Yeah, no, that was never full time. He doesn't necessarily make jewelry. Like,
he's just kind of like.
He's more so like the face, almost. I guess you would say,
yeah.
like the face of like the thing with TV Johnny. But TV Johnny is the one who really makes the jewelry.
Ah, okay, cool.
I mean, he'll do like grills and shit like that. Like he'll
do
the grill, but I don't think he actually goes and makes, puts the diamonds on the teeth and all that shit.
Brand teams up and all that stuff. Okay, yeah. That means to digress, but I just was wondering.
Yeah, but no, the grills are still going. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
What else? Let me see. I did a project with. Are you familiar with Mick? I mean, you're in the music, so you got to be familiar with Mick.
Yeah.
So Mick did the Leon Bridges Coming Home to Texas project a few years ago.
Yes.
I did 2 records on there. But yeah, man. I mean, that's pretty much me, man. DJing, producing, broadcasting, man. I've traveled a little bit, DJing with Slim, and did 106 in Park when that was on TV. A few years back. But yeah, man.
Throwback, dude.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see because that was like our shit. Like, that was like you go home from school every day and pop that.
Yeah, and you want to see 106 in Park. Yeah.
TRL, and you'd be like watching TRL, and it would be like Blink 182, Britney Spears, NSYNC, and like Korn on the same day, and then fucking Eminem and Dr. Dre. Like what?
Yeah, like Destiny's Child or some shit like that. They might throw Destiny's Child in this.
Yeah, that's fucking wild, man. I don't think there's ever been a time where like music was so diversely represented in one show, because there's only 10 songs per episode or whatever. Right. It's wild.
So. Right. You ever been out to Houston?
No, I've never been. I was supposed to go out to South by down in Austin, but that got canceled, so that's good. I was kind of supposed to perform down there, and so it's kind of a bummer, but Nice.
So this is gonna be your first year?
Yeah.
Man.
I've never been to Texas, but I've been like all over, like the East Coast and the Plains states, like Oklahoma and the like the Pacific West or whatever. But I haven't been to Texas. I do want to go though. I'm a Spurs fan, so sorry if that offends anybody.
Yeah, bro. I'm really dog. Like I got my Rockets hat on, dog.
It's just about championships. All the championships. It's fine.
Great team. Great. Pop is an amazing coach. Tim Duncan was greatest power forward ever played a game, man. But we hate.
Have you been watching that MJ or the?
Oh yeah.
I haven't seen that yet. I gotta fucking check it out.
Oh man, it's good. I can't wait. Like now, with the quarantine and everything, like we have something to look forward to on Sundays. Yeah. But yeah, man, that shit was fire.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Well, I don't know. I mean, as far as like, I don't know what other words of wisdom.
Well, here's what I would say for somebody, because I mean, you were mentioning, things that people could do if they live in LA, if they live in New York, if they live in Atlanta, Tennessee, places where there's more so action. I actually lived in Atlanta for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But for someone who's in Houston, who may be watching this, I mean, we're kind of like no man. We're like the 4th largest city, but it's like no man's land when it comes to entertainment. So, what would be advice for someone who's in Houston who's wanting to, get placements, to get into TV and film and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I just met like Fresh Air and Mike Zombie, and they're out of Texas. They're making music. There's obviously an active Texas music scene, especially in hip hop. So I'm sure there's like a viable market. I would look into Austin as well, because Austin is kind of a media hub. There's a lot going on down there. I would get as fucking close to South by Southwest as you humanly can get during the time that, obviously you can't now, but next year, because the amount of shit that's going on down there, and how much of an edge you guys might have to get on to either official shows or unofficial shows, which doesn't matter. I think at this point, like, people are going around where they're going around. So if you can catch a show and be on a show, I know a lot of supervisors that are out there. The Guild was supposed to go out there and do like a happy hour. I would look into the Guild as a resource. Like, the Guild of Music Supervisors puts out a podcast every, like, 2 times a month. So that's on YouTube. It's not a member exclusive thing at this moment. So there's probably 20 different podcasts of people that are far more ahead than me and qualified and knowledgeable than I am. So, but more importantly, you can get to know what they look like and how they work and what they sound like. And maybe it's like a better vibe. Maybe some folks aren't relating to what I'm saying, which is totally cool. But maybe there's, like, for me, I know 100 music supervisors, like, without a doubt, but maybe I'm closer with 20 of them than I am the other 80 or whatever number that is. Maybe I'm comfortable with 50 of them, and 50 I don't know that well, and maybe 20 of them I'm like really close with, and maybe 10 of them I'm like, at this point, near like family relations with, and that's the type of relations that I'm all about, is more about like, that's the type of trust you want, and that's the type of thing where, like, you can text them and that kind of thing, where and I'm always about, like, go with your flow, go with the people that want to fuck with you. Don't fight the waves. Like, sometimes people don't give a shit about you or what you do or how talented you think you are or how talented you actually are. And some people are like, I'm about it. I'm about you. I'm invested in you. And I would imagine there's a community out there in Texas. I'm pretty sure there's a community for the Recording Academy out there.
Yeah, I'm a member. Yeah.
So if you're not a member of the Recording Academy, you're not, like, finding out about what your local resources are. Big shows, like, all that stuff, I mean, it is tough being in an off market, and it's not that Texas is an off market, but it's not quite an on market. Like, it's a little bit more ahead than a place like, Ohio maybe, but like, it's not Los Angeles, it's not New York. And, it's worth looking into, like, at least starting to expand your network into those regions, and maybe, like, start working with folks remotely. We're in a time now where, like, you and I wouldn't have met in person, right? There's no way, but now we're talking and now we're connected. So how does that happen? We have a mutual friend, right? Joseph. So it's like one of those things where that's another way of communing with people. Everyone kind of knows someone or can connect you, and don't be afraid to, like, maybe be like, hey, I'm looking to meet this person, or connect us on email or whatever. Or, like, don't be like, hey, this person should hear my music. It's more like, maybe you're looking to, like, I'm always about, like, informational interviews or learning more about what people do. I'm the type that if you live in LA and you hit me up, schedule pending, I'll meet with you and go for coffee. And, I never know if, like, someone's going to be legit or not, but sometimes I'm super surprised at how talented someone is, or, I've been actually, like, called back and hired by folks that are like, people that were volunteering or coordinating or whatever, like, when I met them. So I'm not the type that's like, I'm too good for you, I'm too big for you. It's more like, I don't know what you're going to do. If you're a hustler, you're going to make it eventually. That's how I made it, is just by like sticking my nose in other people's business where it didn't belong, or trying to, like, squeeze through a doorway, like, and they'd be like, oh, I'm in the room now, what do I do? And then I'm like, well, there's another door. And then, so that's kind of where I'm at, is like, I don't judge a person because they're, like, in a position where they're in a growth or educational position or trying to learn, or maybe they're right out of school. Like, everyone was that way once. I was that way. And if I didn't have my mentors to be like, I'll give this guy a shot, you know, maybe I did work for somebody and it didn't work out so well. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job, or maybe I fell on my face or didn't succeed at something, which happens like constantly. Maybe I didn't work with that person ever again, but they gave me a shot. And then that, you know, I accumulated that like gut wrenching education where I fucking fell on my face, and then I picked myself up and it was like, well, maybe I don't do that the same way next time or whatever, but someone else gave me a shot. So maybe the one person that gave you a shot isn't your ideal like road, but maybe, you know, again, like I said, meeting one person led to another, and then we knew each other, and then
right.
and then a situation where I failed or thought I failed. I didn't really fail, I don't think, but I thought I did at the time, led to a success that ended up changing my life. And you know, you just never know. But in the moment, you're like, wow, my career is over, maybe, you know, or maybe that was like my only in and I ruined it. But like, that's silly, you know, or maybe some asshole, which will happen in your career, will be like, you'll never work in this town again, or threaten you in that way or whatever. That happens too. And
anybody ever told you that before?
In so much as, yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard kind of some stuff like that. Or maybe like, you know, if you don't do this, you're blah, 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 you know, whatever. And you think like, maybe I am gonna like fuck up here or whatever. Or maybe I'll say no to an opportunity that I just didn't feel right about. And their ego was hurt by it, and maybe it wasn't the right fit. And they made some wild comment, maybe not to that extent, but like after you make that decision, you're like, maybe I made the wrong choice, you know? But no, so many people are making music that don't know that same person or whatever, or like in the movie business, they always say that shit, but like so many people are making music and movies and creative, and like, you just find your people, find your crowd. Don't burn bridges. Don't be mean. Be kind to people. Be cool. Give people what they need. Keep up with people's careers. Take gratitude in that. Like just being able to text someone and say congratulations, and they'll respond to you. Like I have some folks that are like way too big to be responding to me, but do it every time. And I'm talking not in the music space, like comedians and folks I've met, especially in the sneaker world, like that I've texted 10 years later, but like, hey, just, you know, saw your thing on Netflix, like, congrats, this thing's amazing. And they'll just respond and ask you how you're doing. And like, you know, if you meet people like that, you never know, like down the path, like even if it's not relevant to your music career, maybe it's relevant to just like, you know, for instance, another example is like that show. I don't know if you've been watching that show, Dave, on FX, about Little Dicky.
Yeah.
So I know I met Andrew Santino, who's like the manager, the comedian with the red hair.
Right.
I knew him from the sneaker world. I remember one day he told me, he came into the store and was like, I'm leaving for New York tomorrow to go to an SNL audition. And we were like excited for that dude. And I remember when he started doing some other minor character appearances, and he was like doing shows at the Laugh Factory. And, you know, I saw him, I just happened to bump into him before he did the show at like the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And like, he's a guy that I still hit up, but like now he's on Dave, right? He's friends with this guy named Gata. I met Gata, who's like probably going to win an Emmy now for that show. I honestly believe, at a Alibi music party. And then he's a Ninja Turtles fan. I have a lot of Ninja Turtles art. We met up. This was like 2 years ago. We met up. I would imagine when they were pitching this show to FX, and we met up, and I gave him a print just because he was a cool dude, and we chatted at this party for like 30 minutes or whatever. And he was at the time rep by Warner Chappell, and I knew folks at Warner Chappell. So now he's on this huge show. So it's one of those things where like, you don't know where these people are going to end up. At the time, he was kind of just like a hype man for Little Dicky, which is a great thing. But a lot of times that road leads to like that same
a TV
like,
show on Fox, on FX. Yeah.
A lot of times it doesn't, though, you know? Yeah. So, but now these two dudes know each other. So what I'm saying is like, this guy that's a comedian has no business knowing the hype man for Little Dicky, but now they're friends and they do their podcasts or whatever. So, that's how the business works, is about like not burning bridges and keeping up with relationships. Like just follow up with folks, and sometimes you won't hear back. sometimes you just keep following up in a nice way, and then they'll hit you every third time or whatever. And they just meant to hit you up, and maybe didn't. I do that all the time. People text me and I won't respond for like 5 days because I'll be like, oh, I meant to respond to this, but I got an email and then like my brain got sidetracked and then I fucking forgot, you know. Or maybe the second time someone hit me up, I was like, oh shit, I never responded to this, my bad, you know. And then so I'll hit them up, or I'll listen to their music finally. So that's what I'm big on, is like, don't be a dick. Don't be like, you didn't respond to me or whatever. It's more about like, just be cool and try to be like understanding and follow up. And I don't know, I've got 10 people working on remixes for me for my Can One Live album. A lot of them I met in the last 6 months. A lot of them I met in Florida when I was at this conference called World Scout, like in February. But I was like, oh, you're cool. You know, they hung around after the panel and like talked to me. And then they sent me the music. I was like, oh, they actually make legit shit. Like, maybe I wouldn't have done that if they just sent it to me in a cold way, but they were like interpersonally meeting me. And I was like, yeah, fucking take a crack at it. You know, who knows if it could be dope, you know? But then I'm like, I'm not with these people specifically, but I've got 10 people working on it. I'm not going to follow up with them. Maybe I'll have 10 more people work on it. And then of that 20 people, 8 of them come back to me with something usable. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, or I could come back with 20 new songs, but it's on you to kind of start delivering that to me. Or if I give you notes, especially if it's a project we're working on for a film and TV show, if you get notes on something and you say no, you're not going to work on that shit anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Like, because if Warner Brothers is like, I like this, but we want to change the drum pattern, and you're like, well, I like this drum pattern. Well, we'll find someone who will change the drum pattern.
That's still Warner Brothers, bro. They don't need you.
Yeah. And I know people, I have a couple friends at this place called the Math Club. This artist named Cheap Shot and this kid named Braden. They make music for film and TV that's like banger hip hop, but now what they're doing is they're crossing over into all genres, but also crossing over into Billboard charted music because they made a song for a film. And they recently released a song with Alessia Cara that they wrote. And they used to just make like corny shit for movies back in the day. And then sometimes they made dope shit, but like they were just making like there's a scene in Spider-Man Homecoming where they're all at this like high school party. And they made this like DJ scene where this DJ is like, a high school DJ is like, DJ. They made that track and it's corny, but it's like funny. It's like a comedically supposed to be corny. Right. But they made money off of it, and they made that track, and it's awesome because it's like it serves to the comedy of the scene. And then immediately after that project, they did the theme song for the Lego Batman movie, that Batman Thinks. Man,
that's crazy.
So you can imagine, like, and that also is like a super funny show or scene for the movie, but it's the head track of the movie. And then they just did a song with Alessia Cara that's now going to be on Billboard. So like the evolution of like how that they took notes from some silly cue that some supervisor was like, yeah, I got this stupid cue, but like, can you do it? And they're like, definitely could do that, you know? And then they did it without causing problems, conflicts. And I don't want to speak too much for them or their process or whatever, but I just know that like they are the types of people where if you give them a call with a legitimate request, they'll turn it around for you and make you something dope, even if it's the dumbest cue or whatever. But they'll also turn around and make something fucking amazing with like a top lining artist, you know? So you got to be that if you want to succeed in this business. And I'm still working to be that. And so when I see friends of mine and peers of mine succeeding in that realm, it makes me excited because it's like, I remember when these people weren't doing that 10 years ago. And so when I'm seeing everyone grow, I'm a supporter of growth, and I'm a supporter of the underdog getting the bone for once, you know, and you know, because the labels are getting the bone 90% of the time. So when the underdog gets it, it's like, yes, dude, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where it's at. And I want everyone to kind of get a win. But I also think it's about like, you have to make great music first. And if you aren't making great music and you aren't getting the cues or whatever, you have to kind of look in and be like, why am I not? Like, what's happening here? And I have to look in that way and be like, why am I not? And self-assessment and growth of skill is like everything, dude. And everyone can say like, oh, you're so talented And I'm not a fan of that, the talented talk, because it's like, that's to me is bullshit. Like, I think like hard work is talent. Like if you're fucking talented, that gets you nowhere. But if you're hardworking, like, and you fucking work your ass off, like when I was 18 years old, I had played piano when I was a kid, but when I was 18 years old, I didn't give a fuck about piano anymore. I played piano like from like ages 5 to 12 and then gave up. And then I played sports and I did all this other stuff, and I played video games. I don't know. But when I was 18, 19, I started playing piano again and going to school for that in university, and I sucked. I was playing fucking Mary Had a Little Lamb again, you know, and I was playing like Swans on a Lake and just trying to like get piano basics down. And then all of a sudden, like 2 years later, I was like smashing because I played for 5 hours a day. I played for 3 hours for school. I would practice for an hour at home or more, and I would make beats for like 5 to 8 hours. I'd be playing piano over samples of hip hop or whatever. So now I can hear a song and I can play it on piano in about 2 minutes because
you trained yourself up that way.
Yeah, I'm not great at sight reading, but I'm great at hearing a song and being like, I can play this, because that's how my fundamentals of early producing was. That's what I would literally suck over beats for so long, and then pretty soon I started to be like, I could make a bass line out of this or whatever. And then after 10 years of doing that, now I could just hear a top 40 hit and be like, oh, give me 2 seconds, I'll pluck this out, and I can improvise something on top of it. But that wasn't because I'm good. I'll get in a room with someone who's good and be like, holy shit, I am a chump, you know, or I am like a fraud. And the only thing that sets me in the edge is hard work and diversification of skill. So maybe that talented guitarist or piano player is better at those things than I'll ever be, or I'll get in a room with 50, 100 orchestral musicians, and I'm just like, I'll sit on the couch, please. But what I am good at is the other things. Maybe I can communicate better to a producer or an engineer, or maybe I can get on the boards and shave off, you know, the mid-range EQ, and they don't even know where that is. So those things, like if I'm going back to my early fundamentals or critiques of myself, where I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none, I'm saying, oh, well, that served me through this entire process, and diversifying my skill sets has allowed me to be more full as a producer. And I'm not talking about music producer. I'm talking about a facilitator of needs, right? So if I get into a meeting with a head of a studio, I'm not fumbling around and being like, I don't know. Well, I'm like, well, I can service whatever you need, right? I can get you musicians, I can get you producers, I can get you engineers. I can also bring this track to another level, or let's say it's a video project or music video. I can budget out like what would be needed to get a budget done. I can find graphic artists, I can find videographers, all those things. Like as a person who produces things, or let's say a lot of people on the chat or watching your video later are like, I want to start a record label. Well, good luck with that if you don't know all those things, because that's the shit where if you can't manage a budget, or if you can't, you know, budget out a music video or find the team to produce that in a certain range, or find the money to get that, like, well, you're not going to be doing a label, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be able to manage an artist because you're not going to know the first thing about what it takes to manage an artist, you know?
Right.
And so that's really where it's at, is like, if you want to do that, which I think is admirable and applicable, I'm the type that like said that same shit when I was 22, but like I had to walk that road now. I had to like actually eat my own words and be like, well, if I want to do this, then I have to fucking know the skills, because you can't just pay people, you know? And if you do, you're not as in control of like what you want in your end game. And a lot of times you'll pay someone for a job that's not good.
Right.
Like I was talking about earlier, or like a website that comes back and you're like, oh, this is a train wreck. And a reason that I got that gig marketing director for that sneaker store was they had built a website with somebody and it was not good. And I came in my first 6 months and they're like, we want you to just sit on this meeting because you're going to be uploading pictures or whatever. We want you to know how to operate the site. And I didn't really know much about web design, but I knew like, this is fucking not good. This is going to be hard to do. This is going to be hard to like change that infrastructure. So they were like, you know what, he's right. And I spoke up. I was like, look, I'm having trouble here. Like, I think there's a lot of problems with how this works. And they like were like, whoa, he's actually right. And a lot of times that type of talk gets you fired. And I'm the type that, you know, you got to know who's in the room and know when you can speak that freely, because in a movie situation, you better shut the fuck up, because if you're a coordinator, you better like wait your turn and sidebar with your music team or your supervisor and just say, hey, and you know what I mean? Like, you can't speak up in a room like that, because you got to kind of know, like, I mean, if you're in a room with Jerry Bruckheimer, like, that dude's been making movies for 40 years. Like, what do you know?
What are you going to tell him? Right.
I don't, you know, so I'm going to be quiet now. But when you're learning, you can ask questions with your supervisor and you can say, like, how does this work? And a lot of times, like, my mentors and supervisors were like super kind. I wasn't controversial. I was more so like, I don't know how this works. Is this common? Maybe because like a lot of times studios, they don't operate the same. So like with my work on training day, I was clearing every song. With Fox or maybe Disney or Sony, they have a whole department that clears all the music for the supervisor. So each supervisor has a different way of working, and you know, a lot of times like supervisors are working on like multiple projects, so the ebb and flow is there, right? So my supervisor is great in advising me on like, well, you know, Sony does this, and when we do this, so I was able to kind of get a more widespread knowledge. So when I actually started working on projects for a lot of these companies, I knew more about their clearance process or whatever, you know. So I hope that kind of helps as far as like relationships and dynamics. But really and truly is like, if you know something and you can speak up in an environment where you don't feel like you're going to be fired for it, I would take the chance sometimes. You know, if you have a way to solve a problem that is like everyone's encountering, fucking solve it, you know, do it in a kind way and in a way that's like helpful. But like, that's the shit that really like gets you kind of into the next game. Like you know, after you have a couple years of what I would say coordinating experience or assistant experience or whatever, if you're trying to break in this business, you got to be an assistant for a good amount of time. But after a while, you start to know things, and if you worked on projects, you've put out fires in certain areas or whatnot, or maybe you have a skill set of knowledge that doesn't come from the job you have currently, but maybe another field, like you can apply it, you know. And anyway, that's kind of my my philosophy on things. But I think it all comes down to like, you know, I like to, there's the business is crazy, right? Like there's this Harvey Weinstein bullshit. There's like all of that fucking like toxic work environment. There's that mailroom mentality. There's that like, you're not a fucking executive. You're a peon. Like, I don't know. I did catering. Like I watch that shit. I don't like, if I'm at a party, I'm like, hey, I want to get to know the caterer because they're serving the best meals and they're going to come by me more often if I fucking am nice to them or and I know they're all working in the different sides of the business. So I'm kind of like, well, I'm sure I'll see you if I see you. But like a lot of people don't even want to see the caterer, or they don't even want to see the bartender or the assistants or the volunteers checking people in. But I don't do that. I don't fuck with that because like I was that. And so, I don't know. I just don't see the advantage. So I'm in of the essence of the business where, I don't know, I want to be in a fun business, a cool business, a business where everyone's kind of in a more family type environment, or like, that's the shit I work with. So when I work with people that aren't like that or dicks for no reason, and even like I've been working in the business for 10 years and people are still dicks to me, and I'm like, all right, dude, I don't need to work with you. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't need to be on your time. Like you could be on my time. Because I don't see the benefit of that. Like, and most of the people that are like in these huge high profile positions that I know are cool and nice, or have mentored people or been mentored. So, you know what I mean? Like, why would I want to be around this toxic work environment? And sometimes you kind of have to, but like after a while, like you don't want to have to expose yourself to like toxicity in the workplace. And I've done that enough to where like now I don't want to do that. I would rather not be in the business if it comes to like, you know, for men, just like being around chauvinists is bad enough, but for women, there's like sexual assault and harassment and all this stuff. And like, you know, like, I don't know, mansplaining and all the crazy shit that goes on. Like, why would you, you know what I mean? Like, why do we have to be in a business that, exploits that, or is, you know, with racism and sexism? I just don't think that like this is a time where that behooves us. I mean, in music supervision, like the amount of successful, talented, working females that are like probably better at their jobs than women are huge. Like, it's almost more impactful, you know, than men are in that way, and they bring a refreshing perspective. So I don't see like how being sexist or being like, you know, in that environment, or being toxic, or females being pushing down other females to get ahead in the workplace. There's that environment as well. I don't see it. I don't see the benefit. I think that like everyone has a place. It's such a big business. It's hard to break in. Like, it's hard for me to break in. Like, but I think that like the more people work together, the more kind of cool fucking shit that can come out of, you know,
right,
the business, you know. Or you're from Houston, man. I've never been to Houston. Maybe your Houston perspective of like how you do things, or what your brain does in a music making environment, creates this whole new way of doing stuff, right? Houston music's crazy, dude. You know, Reno music's crazy. Like, I don't even know if you've heard Reno music. Like,
I haven't. I was
gonna
ask you what was the hip hop scene like out there, because I've never really met anybody who comes from that scene as far as in hip hop and all that.
Well, at least when I was in it, like, there's this, like, obviously we're close to the Bay Area and Vallejo and all that shit, so we were in that world. But there was this like underground hip hop scene that was like, we would take stuff from Chicago or like Minnesota Atmosphere, or we love like Del the Funky Homo Sapien. So we would kind of like make music that was like a hybrid of that. It was like it was like sample based, but it was like had that like that snot, that nastiness of like the Bay Area swing. So it was like, you know, because we were really influenced by Oakland, because it was 4 hours away, or San Francisco or Sacramento music. So, and a lot of folks lived there or grew up there, and then they moved to Reno because like cost of living was way lower. So a lot of folks in the 90s and 2000s sold their $1 million homes or whatever in San Francisco, because a house costs $1 million, whatever. It's a 1-bedroom, whatever. And then they sold that, and then they had $50,000 to $100,000 to buy a house in Reno, and they would have a 5-bedroom house. So a lot of folks in the 90s and 2000s moved there, transplanted from other places. So I'm like a 3rd generation Nevadan, but so we grew up there. My parents and I went to the same elementary school and all that bullshit. But like you know, like the hip hop scene there was weird because it was like a casino scene. So there was a lot of acts coming in because there's money there. It's off market because it wasn't in Vegas. Vegas is like 8 hours away, so they could capitalize on the casino market and the money that the casino market had to bring these artists in, or the subsidiary like clubs and stuff. But then, you know, so we were in a pretty interesting scene, but I think there was a disconnect musically or business wise from the people who make music and like publishing and all that stuff. Sorry. So, but yeah, it was cool, man. Like, it's impacted my career a lot as far as what I look at music. And my again, you guys can look him up. His name's Idle Hands. The type of shit he was making in like 2005 when I first discovered him was like game changing, but no one like was able to hear him. He didn't have the market. It was still MySpace and shit. But like for a Reno artist to break is like still like not happening very often. So, you know, but like the type of music that he was making was like, I think if you heard some of that shit today, you'd still be like, damn, that's fucking tight. Even though like, frankly, we didn't know about like EQing or reverb or fucking all the drums were peaking. We didn't know about that shit. We like Pro Tools was just kind of coming out back then. So
yeah, 2005. Yeah, you're just in the start of this shit. Yeah.
And we were like making beats on an MPC and then pumping them track over one by one into Pro Tools, and it took like an hour to do it, bounce a track over.
Oh man, that process through MIDI, just letting MIDI run and just
yeah. No, we didn't do MIDI. We did audio form. So just like,
oh no,
you know, if you did a 3-minute track, it would be like 3 minutes for the kick, and it would be like poo, 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 and then it'd be the snare. It'd be like,
yeah,
you know, and then it'd be, you know, one lead. It would take, we would just be like, fucking, you have to manually do it. So we would save up beats for like 4 beats in the MPC, and then the MPC would turn off, and then we would lose all 4 of those beats and shit. So that was like what we were doing. We didn't know anything about mixing, you know. We just were like, it's in the Pro Tools now. It's magic, you know. So moving to LA like changed my whole perspective on mixing, but like my foundations of producing are all embedded in like what we were doing in Reno then, and then like how can I apply that like energy into like what we do now, you know, or what I do now. And I would imagine that will be always the same with you in Houston, is like that Houston sound is like so iconic, and like the way you guys are and the way your subculture is, and like that always is like is embedded in the DNA.
Yeah, always. Yeah, when I moved to Atlanta for a couple of years, and it was still like I would feel like I'm coming in there, like I don't really have the Houston shit on me. Yeah, they can sniff it out, like Houston, yeah. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is, man, but
and you're like we're both making hip hop, or all of us are making hip hop, but we're like, well, first of all, I'm a fucking white dude from Reno, Nevada, so I'm out of the game. Like I instantly, even in Reno, I was like, who's this 17-year-old kid? You know what I mean? Like this white boy, you know, with this other white dude, and then all these other dudes are like actually legit, like own the culture, and I'm just like coming in, you know. But I'm like the Mr. Rogers in that scene, like, what up, neighbors? You know what I mean? But like, you know, and that took a while for me to like prove that I earned it, and I don't think a lot of people even still were like about it. They were like, no, dude, you know. So that was something that I like always had. That I always had this like chip on my shoulder, like, yo, dude, you know, like I want to be here. I want to be a part of this. I love this. I'm passionate. I'm willing to prove it. You know, I'm willing to intern or do whatever it takes to learn. And some people were like, well, I'll charge you. And then other people were like, oh, just come over on Saturday. I'll show you how to make the shit. And that's why Matt, Idle Hands, was always like, I'll always feel like I owe that dude, because he just was like open to helping me, you know. And that's the first person that ever did that for me. Which, as you can see, the theme of this whole thing is people helping and mentoring other people.
Right.
So, and then this Grammy Next program that I'm a part of, I got asked to be a part of. I was mentored by Harvey Mason Jr., which was like insane. If you guys don't know who he is, like, please look his credits up. But now I've done that. I've gone through my program, and the Grammy Next program is probably like, they open up to like 20 to 30 people a year. So it was like very fucking big blessing and responsibility, I felt like, to be a part of that and be asked to be a part of that. And I engaged with the Recording Academy pretty consistently to like earn their trust and earn their, you know, and be an advocate for them. And I think advocacy for the Recording Academy is huge. And the more you do that, the more they will instill that you're a community member. But then now it's my job to be a mentor to folks, the next generation of the Grammy Nexters, but anyone like the Guild people or any music producer that's like, I want to learn how to do this shit. I'll teach anybody, you know. If someone wants to learn how to use Logic, I'll be like, yeah, fucking here's some stuff, you know. I'll hop on a Zoom call. I don't know, you know, like, you know. So that's kind of how it is. Is like, although I'm busy, I like to make time for people who are willing and embracing the educational process, you know.
Nice.
Or do these talks or speak to people about my hard experience, or the ebbs and flows of like making money and not making any money, and like the peaks and valleys of that. And like, I understand that almost better than anybody. So like I said, I moved to LA with $200 in my account. Like, it wasn't an easy process. I lost my car in 3 months of being here, and I had to like walk for 2 years and take the bus and all that shit. So, yeah, dude, I get it. It's fucking hard. You know what I mean? But if you find this place deep down in your belly, like, and you dig deep, you're like, I could make it. I could turn it out. I could fucking do it. And once you have that and you've started your own company or whatever, or just have the notion, like, I can fucking survive. That is more powerful than anything. That will get you so far, and it frees you from this, like,
oh shit, Joseph said he got hit by a car his first week in LA. God damn.
I met Joseph probably around that time. And I didn't know that, actually. I don't know when that happened, but I met Joseph at Ski Lodge when I think he was an intern. and I was doing a website for their thing that Build Destroy Music, and Joseph is the person that connected us, obviously, which was 8 years ago. And you know, to this day, meeting him when he was I think he was an intern. I'm pretty sure. I don't mean to misspeak for you, but we were both basically like in the same boat at the same time. I had just graduated LA Recording School, and fucking like, I'm sure Joseph's story is probably far more interesting than mine. You know what I mean? Like, as far as what he saw, what he experienced, and he's just a guy that's like moving through the business like I am, and what I'm about is like, I told you, I'll see Joseph again, I'll see you again, I'll see all these like volunteers again, and I countless people have reached out to me and been like, yo, thank you for helping me because I got a job at BMG as a result of you. Or someone will be like, hey, do you know anyone at CBS? And I'll be like, let me connect you with the head of CBS right now because I trust you based on the work you've done for me volunteering. Or if I ask someone to do something and do it for free, dude, I get it. It's fucking hard to do that. So like, I'm like, yeah, I'll introduce you, you know?
Right.
And I have countless stories of people that like, I got them an interview and they got a job, you know, or they'll call me again. They've got a job somewhere and they'll be like, hey, I want you to take a meeting with them. And I happen to know the people that I'm taking a meeting with, but they're the ones that advocated for me hardest to get that job or whatever. So, I'm always looking for that. I don't know. LA is crazy and Houston's crazy. I'm sure you're always looking for your next paycheck. So why would you treat people bad? You know, I don't get it. It just doesn't make sense as a life philosophy, you know?
Right. I mean, and the truth is, I mean, you never know who's gonna be what, man. Just because you're in one place today doesn't mean you'll be there tomorrow, whether it's a higher up or at the bottom. You know what I mean? All that shit can change, man.
Yeah. And also a good factor is like just keeping up with people. Like, I know a lot of people who either like quit jobs or get fired or get laid off, and then they end up at a better position at another place, or a unilateral position at another label or whatever. And that's the way the business works. And so, I mean, if you haven't been fired in LA or in the record business or whatever, it's like, it's only a matter of time, you know? So, and it doesn't have to be like malicious. It's just be like, hey, we don't have the budget for this, or we're going to go in a different direction, or, you know, whatever. But, you know, they'll end up working at some cooler place. And so like, that's what it is. It's like dreams and adversity, broken and fixed, and hard and easy and rich and poor. Like you kind of just go through this process, and you kind of have to find the Goldilocks zone in life, and like finding the way to like keep equalized. And you're never going to be perfectly happy, and you're never going to be always sad. You're going to be in the middle somewhere. And like one day I've had situations like Joseph where I got asked to be on like a scoring stage with John Debney, who did The Jungle Book and like all these big movies for Disney and shit. And then my car got towed the same day, and I had to fucking like Uber it to the fucking studio and like pretend like everything was fine. And I'm on the scoring stage at Fox Pictures on fucking Ice Age 5 with like Jesse J or whatever. And I'm like, oh, this is going good. And then I'm like, in the back of my mind, like, my car is in the fucking impound and I don't have $200 to $500 to get it out. So what the fuck am I going to do? You know, but in the same midst, I'm like, this right here that's happening is a dream to be in this room. And so,
take the good with the bad.
Okay, here's the thing. When you're in LA and the gate of Fox Studios opens up for you and you get to go in there, that's crazy. That's still crazy. Same thing with like Warner Brothers. The fucking, oh, you're on the list, and the door opens. Every time I'm like, wow, who did I fool? Like, who let me in?
Yeah.
You know, and when you look at the numbers, it's like 1% of all, like the entire population of people who've ever lived in LA, maybe, or maybe like, let's say 10%, but less than 1% of all population have ever been in those compounds. So it's like, when you're there, you're like, this is fucking crazy. You know, this isn't like, so I don't know. I'm the type that like, some people are like, oh, here you go, another day at the studio. But I'm like, every time I go in there, like even 10 years in, I'm like, holy shit. Like, you know, this is the same stage they made The Wizard of Oz at Sony. Like the Wizard of Oz is making, you know, or whatever. So it's like,
oh wait, they're counting me down again. We got about 1 minute and 50 seconds.
Cool. I think we could probably call it. But yeah, like for me, it's like, you know, looking at life in those lenses is like, you know, not a lot of people get this opportunity. And so there's a blessing there. And so what I would say is like, try to work so hard that those blessings start to come more frequently. And it's going to be hard. And sometimes, you know, the path doesn't always work out for everybody, but maybe there's a niche where it does work out, and you have to kind of find that. And it's not always spelled out. And like I said, you could be on a path that you're like, this is going nowhere. And then you meet somebody that puts you on another path that steers you kind of back to where you want to be. And I think it's all about finding that balance of like, where are you headed? Where do you want to be headed? You know?
Yeah.
And be safe with your money. Be safe with like your vices. Don't do anything stupid that's going to compromise your goal and your mission to be successful. And fucking, if you want it, go after it, and know it's going to take a career's worth of time to like finally get to a place where you're like, oh, I guess looking back, it wasn't so hard. But even now, like I'm still on a new trajectory, looking forward to a new thing. So it always kind of feels like you haven't made it. You know, you've just kind of like, you're on stepping stones to your death, essentially, as grim as that may be. But like, I'll be chasing. Yeah, I'll be chasing this till I die. So I want to say thank you for listening to my crazy diatribe.
Nah, that's all good, man. Thanks for joining me in the conversation, man. This has been great.
Yeah,
very informative. I hope whoever's watching has picked up on some gems, man, because they will definitely drop tonight. So thanks again, man. Thanks, Joseph. Shout out Elliot Guidry, who made the fly, my boy from Houston.
Yeah, thanks, man.
For sure, man. All right,
hit me up. Sidebar.